Hi viewers, this is Salahuddin with a new topic. In the previous topic, we talked about the American Revolution. In that important topic, we tried and we covered all the important aspects of the American Revolution. And today's topic is Agrarian Revolution. This topic is really important from examination point of view. If you check out the previous papers about PMS and CSS or PCS or ICS, you will come across this question from where the questions are asked from various dimensions. Therefore, the importance of this topic, agrarian revolution, cannot be ignored in covering all the syllabus about the British history. So today we will talk about the agrarian revolution or agriculture revolution. We will try to cover all the aspects of this agrarian revolution, which includes the causes, impacts, and what was agrarian revolutions, what was earlier about the old agrarian revolution. So we are trying to cover the aspects of the agrarian revolution one by one in a series. So coming to the topic, and the topic is agrarian revolution. How agrarian revolution took place, what was agrarian revolution. So let's come to the topic, what was agrarian revolution. In this lecture we will talk about the agrarian revolution and then the important features of the agrarian revolution, like how that old agrarian revolution was taking place. What were the aspects of the old agrarian revolution, and how they would conduct their state of affairs in agrarian revolution. So what was agrarian revolution? And as we know, this revolution took place in 18th century, and by this agrarian revolution modern technologies were brought in, while the old system that we are coming to talk about in detail in just a bit later, the system was run through old and obsolete tools, mechanisms, while coming to this agrarian revolution. And when this revolution took place in 18th century, the agrarian revolution was completely revolutionized, which comprised of an organized mechanism and taking advantages of the modern scientific technologies. So the replacement of the old system by new scientific lines and mechanisms is known as agrarian revolution. In that revolution, definitely they would deal with crops, which includes many types of crops. Those the telling and reaping of those crops would take place through old and obsolete systems, while in this revolution new mechanisms, new system, and new with the new fashion, the system would be run on the scientific lines. So what were the features of the old agrarian revolution? First, let's talk about the features of the old agrarian revolution. Then we will try to cover each feature in detail. The first feature on which the old agrarian revolution was based was open field system. We will come to talk about open field system. The second is manure system. The third is fields without enclosures. The fourth is land to be left follow. The fifth is commonplaces, and the sixth is rigidity of the old agrarian system. And seventh and the final feature of the old agrarian revolution was cottage industry. So these were the important features of the old agrarian revolution. Let's come to discuss one by one in detail what were the features of the old agrarian revolutions. So the open field system. In the open field system, the land was divided into three categories, and those three categories were good land, average land, and bad land. So the land was divided into these three categories. So what the farmers would do, they would squander and waste their energy by coming in and going out of the good land. They would lift the land which was bad or average and would come to the land which was good. So thus a huge area of land would be left fallow. Means they would not be used for the agricultural purposes or for tiling and reaping the crops purposes. So thus this open field system was one of the basic features of the old agrarian revolutions. The second is manure system. What was manure system? And manure systems, the land owners were divided into two categories. One would call the freeholders, who would own large and big lands, and the other was the coffee holders, who would own small lands. Thus, this system always obstruct the agricultural purposes or remain impediment in the agricultural activities. This system would run in the rural areas where the landlords or the feudal lords, they had very strong control. The coffee holders or the small land owners, they were at the disposal of these freeholders or big landlords, and those landlords and feudal lords would often inflict various obstructions in their activities while cultivating their lands. Thus, this system was another impediment or a kind of stoppage in the flow of maintaining the agricultural activities. The third important features of the old agrarian revolution was fields without enclosures. Fields without enclosures means the fields had no certain demarcations. The fields were not fortified, and those fields were open, where often the passers-by also make ways in those fields. Secondly, they would also breed. They would also breed, and they would also tame cattle. So those cattle would also graze in those open fields. Thus, the open field without enclosures, they would not produce the amount of crops which could easily meet the demand of the farmers. And also, the unwanted plants would also craft in or grieve in those fields. So this fields without enclosures was another important features of the old agrarian revolutions. In the open field system, as we talked about, three important things would take place. The passerby would make ways in those fields. Secondly, the kettles would often strayed in those fields, and the third is the unwanted plant would grow in uh, those those fields where the farming activities were happening. The fourth is feature of this agrarian revolution was the land left to be fallow. Land left to be fallow means they would not cultivate the land in some period of time or in some years. They would cultivate the land in 1 or 2 or 3 years. By the next year, they had to left those lands without cultivating. So thus, this land to be left means the land would live in the next 3 or 4 years unfallow, means uncultivated, in order to increase the production or fertility of the soil or of their specific land. So what they would do, in the first year they would grow wheat, in the second year they would grow barley, in the third year they would grow the maize, and by the fourth year they would leave those land unfallow, means uncultivated. So thus land to be left fallow was another feature of the old agrarian revolutions. The fifth is common places. So there were common places, and those common places were left for some few causes. And each village had such a common place where they would graze their cattle, and the drawback of this common places were that a huge amount of land was left uncultivated, because they had to graze their cattle, and they were also taming, and they were also having cattle for various demands. So those grazes, to provide food to those cattle, they would graze them in those common places, which we call it the pastures, where the lands are grazing. So thus this system was also there. And another important feature of this common place was some for the procurement of fuel wood, the wood which could be used as a fuel for burning and various other purposes and for construction. So certain common places were also maintained to meet their demands of fuel procurement, where the wood would grow, where the plants would grow, and later on those plants would be used as a fuel or for construction purposes. So these few aspects would take place in the common places. The sixth is rigidity of the old system. In this old system of agriculture, it was absolute. Absolute means which cannot work anymore, and it was based on certain mechanism, on certain ways which could not provide the efficient amount of agriculture products, agriculture what we call it. So those agriculture products and fertility could not be provided as a result of this old agriculture system. And the system was absolute in a sense that it was only efficient at that time. It could not work later on. So this system was also rigid in another way, that the new farming method or mechanism was a kind of very hard step to be taken at that time, because people were unacceptable, and they would resist any change in this agriculture system. So this system was rigid and absolute. The seventh important feature of the old agrarian revolution was, beside agriculture, small scale industry also grew side by side. Why this? The small scale industry include the cloths industry, the soap industry, and other things of daily use. Because if the agriculture system had certain flaws which could not efficiently meet the demands of the farmers, so if one year those fields or those lands could not produce efficient amount of production, so the farmers could not find square meals a day. Thus, they also grew side by side these small cottage industries of cloth, soap, and other things of daily use in order to meet their demand. Uh, so, this small industry also took place beside the old agriculture system. So this is all about the agricultural revolution. In this lecture, we talked about the basic features of the old agrarian revolution. In the next part of this topic, we will talk about the causes of the agricultural revolution, which is the most important topic, the most important part of this topic, agricultural revolution. So this is all about the agricultural revolution. In the coming lecture, in the coming part of this lecture, we will talk about causes of the agricultural revolution. So thank you so much for watching the video.